to be interviewed. On that basis, that's when we felt that we should issue a statement to postpone the release of the report up until today. So at 11 o'clock, we went back to the family at the offices of their legal firm, and we allowed the forensic investigators to take the family through the report, the entire report. And we also gave them the copy of the full report, not the executive summary. We also gave the family the copy of the full report. After our investigators have taken them through the report, I want to quote what they said. That the family note this report, and the family needs time to study the report, and only then they will express a view about the report, but they don't intend to stop the department from releasing the report. So that's the go-ahead that we received from the family, that they don't stop us from releasing the report. They want time to go through the report, and they will indicate when they want to express a view. But the legal firm representing the family indicated that they've already appointed in their own investigators. So the report that you are giving them, it will be part of the investigation that they are taking as the legal firm. So we are not aware by when will they conclude that report, but we left them with the report. And I want to appreciate the family support. We expressed once more our sincere commitment to support them and to make ourselves available if they request something from the department. Immediately after that, we came to the school to meet the school management team. The reason why I wanted to meet with the school management team is that there are teachers that are implicated in the report. These are teachers that are executing day-to-day responsibilities here, and therefore it's very important that the school management team understand the implications of this report. But they also run the day-to-day affairs of the school, and the report have sections where some of these issues are flagged. The delegation was led by the acting principal, or headmaster is referred, and 3 deputy principals, together with 4 HODs. They were taken through the report, and the SMT, that is the school management team, accepted the report without any major objections. We then moved to meet with the SGB. The SGB was also taken through the report, and they raised sharply various issues. One, they claimed that they were not taken through the previous report that found some of the teachers guilty, and that also recommended the manner in which the grade 8 camps should be conducted, and also this code of silence. We clarified that part, that the report was presented to a full SGB before it was released to parents. And therefore, any allegation that says that they don't have that report, that allegation is misplaced. Secondly, they pleaded with us that because of the high number of teachers that are implicated, they plead that we must handle this matter with care. I'll come back on this matter later, after the report is given to you. They also requested that the image or the brand of the school should be protected. And I cautiously indicated to them that a death and somebody has died, we can't choose a brand over a loss of life. But nevertheless, we note their concern and we'll work around that particular concern. After meeting this, and the SGB then gave us the go-ahead to meet with parents and to release the report. Thereafter, we went to a meeting with the labor unions that represent the teachers that are implicated, and we took them through the report, and they also gave us a go-ahead to release the report. You were here. We met with the parents as well. We took them through the report. They raised issues that I will flag when I come back later. And on the basis of this meeting, they also gave us a go-ahead to release this report. So you will see that whoever is mentioned in this report, whoever is a stakeholder of this school, all those people were consulted, and on the basis of those consultations, they've given us the go-ahead to release this report. So it's within this context that I want to invite Peter Harris to come and present this report and take you through the report, and thereafter we'll take your questions and then we'll clarify whatever that needs to be clarified. Peter? Okay, maybe before we take Peter, are we fine? Okay. Okay. Yes, Peter?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. MEC, my name is Peter Harris. I'm from the law firm Harris Newpin Molabatsi. We were requested to conduct a forensic investigation into the circumstances and facts that led to the tragic death of a grade 8 learner at Parktown Boys High School, Enock Mpianzi. And we have proceeded to conduct that forensic investigation. There is a very detailed 170-page report complete with annexes, and which are quite voluminous, but we have compiled an executive summary. And I've been requested just to take you through some of the key points of that executive summary. The key issues, to summarize, is that on the 15th of January 2020, the school, Parktown Boys School, I'll call it the school, sent its grade 8 incoming learners on a school camp at the Nyati Bush Camp. A roll call was held at 8:30 in this hall, and thereafter the boys were put on buses and they went to the camp. They got to the Nyati Bush Camp, it's in the northwest, where they were given lunch, and then they undertook certain exercises. The first exercise was, if you can put that one pick up if you don't mind. No. There. That's a Google map of the area. And the first exercise was for them on this rugby field, for the learners who were split into 15 groups of approximately 12 each, to build a stretcher out of a couple of pieces of wood and various things.
Try to speak from there,
okay.
Peter.
Sure.
I know it's difficult.
No, it's fine. And so they constructed their stretcher, and then their exercise was to run across the field around the poles, down through a narrow path onto that stretch of sand there, and then into the water there, where it says start of activity. Now, what happened was that the water exercise went seriously wrong, as a result of which Enock Mpianzi drowned. We don't have the post-mortem report yet, so we do not know the exact cause of death, but all the evidence points to him having drowned in or near the river. Now, I'm going to deal with certain key points that are contained in our findings. And the first point, just to bring to your attention, that we interviewed a number of learners in the presence of their parents. Their identity was kept confidential. We interviewed the 7 educators who were present with the learners on that camp. We interviewed the headmaster a number of times. We interviewed the camp manager, Mr. Knutzer, the camp manager of Inyati Bush Camp, in the presence of his attorneys from Herter Spies. The school SG, excuse me, the school and the educators were interviewed in the presence of their attorneys. So the first issue we find was that there was an issue in relation to the problem of the roll calls. There's a roll call on Wednesday morning in this hall at 8:30, and it's a roll call of all the individual incoming grade 8 learners. There are 11 who don't answer their names, who are seen as absent. Thereafter, they go to the bus. Enock Mpianzi's parents confirm that they put him on the bus and their bag in the trailer. The boys then go out to the camp, as I've said. The fact of the matter is that when they get to the camp, because they arrived a bit late, they have a quick lunch. But the roll call, the accurate roll call list of the boys that was taken at the assembly at the hall travels back in the bus with the bus driver. And it comes back to Johannesburg. One of the educators phones the bus driver and says, please, can you come back with the correct roll call? He says, I can't. So the issue is this, is that as a result, there is no accurate record at the camp of those attendees, of learners at the camp. After the water exercise, and I'll go into that in more detail, the principal is worried about what took place during the water exercise. So he decides to hold a roll call, and correctly so. The problem is they haven't got the right roll call list. So they contact the school sends a list, but there is a list of all incoming learners to grade 11. The result is that there are 11 boys who are not there, much like that morning. And when those boys' names are called who are not there, the principal asks, do you know anybody who has anybody seen that person, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody says anything. That's fairly common cause. And as a result of the assumption that gets made by the school that the 11 were the same 11 who didn't pitch in the morning for the roll call, they assume that everyone's there, and they then go out for the sleep out in the bush. The school, meanwhile, sends the names of the learners that are missing back to enrollment here, although it's in the early evening, and in the morning, thank you, in the morning, the school starts to phone around those 11 parents, or groups of parents of the 11 learners, and get told that, thanks very much, MEC, I'll just put it, and get told by Mr. Ntambu, the father of Enock Mpianzi, that in fact Enock was on the camp. There's also another set of parents who say, yes, their boy's also on the camp, and it turns out when they check that actually he was there during the roll call but didn't stick up his hand or didn't say yes. But it's only at 12:45 on Thursday that it is found that Enock Mpianzi is actually missing. So we find that there is negligence on the part of the school in not having the accurate and correct roll call list of all attendees at that camp, and that the relevant educators should be held responsible and charged. And that includes the headmaster as the ultimate, the sort of commander-in-chief or the CEO of the school. The fact is that if the correct roll call list had been used, they would have realized 18 hours earlier that a boy was missing, and search attempts could have been activated. In fact, that's only really happens. The emergency rescue procedures, the farmers, the 300 farmers going up and down the river, the spotter plane, the drones, the searches, the police, only really commences in the afternoon of Thursday. Whereas if the correct roll call list had been used, they would have realized that he was missing at 5:30 the previous day, right after the water exercise. It may well be that he may really have been deceased at that point, but that is speculation because we don't know when that took place. So we find that there's liability in relation to the school in terms of their negligence in not having the correct roll call list. Then in terms of the issue of the safety and care of learners, let me deal with the level of the river. When we conducted the inspection in Loka on the 24th of January 2020, Mr. Knutze said to us that the level of the river was a meter higher on the 24th than it had been on the 15th of January, which is when the water exercise with the learners took place. We then, during the course of our investigation, we looked at various photographs with a close eye, and we scrutinized them, and we found the following. Now this is a picture of the group of learners on the day of the incident that was taken by a teacher. So that's on the 15th of January. Now if you note the white mark on that's ringed on the pipe, as well as the X on the concrete, you'll see the level of the river. In the picture that we took in the inspection in Loka, you'll see the same white, and you'll see really much the same amount of concrete, i.e. the level of the river on the day of the inspection in Loka and the day of the exercise is much the same. So we found that the evidence given to us by Mr. Knutze that the river was a meter low, which is quite an amount, actually, on the day of the water exercise was misleading and false. Makes a big difference, because the level of a river, if it's a meter higher, and you must remember you're dealing with 13-year-olds, etc., it affects whether they can stand or whether the current is sufficient to sweep them off their feet. So we find that the information, that our analysis of the level of the river shows it was much the same, and that the evidence of Mr. Knutze was false. Then, in relation to the issue of the safety and duty of care of learners during the water exercise on 15th of January, we find that the school and the educators were negligent in the fulfillment of their duty as in loco parentis, which is in the place of a parent, in fulfilling their duties. The school's policy in relation to tours and camps is that educators have to be present during all activities, and they have to look after the safety and well-being of the learners. The fact of the matter is that the learners, I beg your pardon, the educators get to the stretcher exercise late after it's already commenced. So they don't know whether there have been any safety instructions, if any, and what was said. They then follow the learners down to the river. So, if we can move to that, please. So, no, let's just go back to the other one. There you go. No, next one. Sorry, back there you are. So that's where the activity takes place. They build the stretcher, they come down a path onto here, and the learners then do, that's the start of the exercise. Disregard this, I'm going to come to it later. The learners get in the river and they go down. Okay? The 5 educators stand there and they watch the learners in the river. But by the time they get down there, 13 of the 15 groups have already gone down the river. So the horse is bolted. They're there only for the last 2. And they stand there and they don't take any action into what's taking place in the water. Now what's taking place in the water is this. Just go to that picture of the youngsters. That. Now, you can see part of a sort of makeshift raft and a bit of a tube, because the learners were meant to carry the stretchers down to the start point, tie the stretcher to a tube, and then go down the river. Okay? Now, you can see this is a river with strong currents, and these youngsters are clinging without life jackets to this makeshift raft. In fact, what happens is that most of these rafts disintegrate at around about this point. This is just beyond the pump, or that pipe that you saw. And then, frankly, it becomes very, very messy and awful. None of the boys are pulled out at the point which they should be pulled out. They're all swept downriver. So you can see that is these kids in the water. And there's strong currents, and they're being swept down, and they clearly can't stand. Now, the fact that the educators got down there once 80% of the groups had already proceeded down the river, and then stood and let the other two come by without stopping the exercise when it was clearly dangerous, we find to be in breach of their obligations of the duty of care in loco parentis, and we find them to be negligent, if not reckless. The fact is that when the headmaster comes down 10 minutes later, because he's just arrived, excuse me, he looks at there and he sees two learners in the river coming down without life jackets. He says, "What's going on here?" And he immediately stops the exercise, because he can see this is a problem. But it's sadly too late, because he then says to an educator who's standing nearby, "Go back to the start and tell them to stop." But the facilitator at the start, the camp facilitator, has already left. Thanks, it's just been pointed out by a colleague of mine that we should not forget to acknowledge Carte Blanche, who provided not these photographs, but some of the bigger ones, which I'll show. And you can see it's from the Carte Blanche show. We did obtain their permission to use their pictures. So we find that there's a breach of the school's duty of care. We find even more so with the camp. And I'll come to the issue of life jackets. Then there's the issue of the route followed by the learners during the water exercise. Now, when we interviewed Mr. Knutzer, the camp manager, on the 24th of January 2020, Mr. Knutzer said that the route that the learners followed was as follows. He said they came down from the field through the path, and he said because the river was a meter low, which we now know to be false, they ran along dry sand to a promontory there, which we took pictures of on our inspection in loco, then went back to about there, and then ran back to that point there, and then on to the finish, those two posts there. And that he had stationed 5 camp facilitators that he employed, amongst others. He employed 17, I think, in total, for this camp there, what we call the red zone. Because this water here is shallow, it's about 1.5 feet deep. And this water is not. It's deep and it's fast flowing, there's strong currents, and there are rocks. And that was the version of the camp as to what happened. The fact of the matter is that it's all false. And the route that the learners actually followed, which is confirmed by the learners and the educators, and Mr. Williams, the headmaster, is that they were told to get in there and to go down to where F2 is, which is a facilitator 2. There was a facilitator from the camp, and to get out there. But the river is too strong, and it carries them down. This is the Carte Blanche photograph, as you can see. It carries them way, but very few get out here. 1 or 2 boys who are strong swimmers, as soon as they get into the river, they realize they're in trouble, and they panic, and they manage to swim to get out there. But that's like 2. The vast majority get carried downstream, and a number of them cling to the reeds, and about 15 of them end up on this island here in the middle of the river. And you can see the river flows there and it flows there. Mr. Williams, the headmaster, after having stopped the exercise, but it's too late, runs down and sees some boys there who have formed a human chain to extract people from the island. And he starts to organize a rescue effort to get those boys from the island. When we said to him, did you think there was risk? He said, absolutely. Or he didn't say we used the words absolutely. He said, yes, there was risk. That's why I stayed to try and rescue the boys, which he did, with the help of 2 facilitators and other boys. And eventually they get them all off the island. But the fact of the matter is that, according to Knutzer, if we can just go back, according to Knutzer, the camp manager, no boys went past that point X. He says they all got out here. Now we know that's just not true. The vast majority got swept downstream. Many of them get rescued from that, there's the island, but many get picked up around here because now facilitators are coming down and they're starting to rescue these learners out of the water. Finally, just below that hall, that's hall, there are some rocks. Boys are finally rescued there. It's a long way down. The body of Enock Mpianzi is found further down, 1.8 kilometers downstream. So the version given by the camp of what took place, in our view, is a disgraceful falsity. Then the next issue is the issue of life jackets, because it's quite clear that none of these learners were issued life jackets. Our finding is that they should quite clearly have been issued life jackets. When we put that to Mr. Knutzer of the camp, he said, we only issue life jackets for people that go down the river, and because this took place in shallow water, we didn't think that they should have life jackets. But we know that it didn't take place in shallow water. We know it took place in the river. And they weren't issued with life jackets. And we asked him how many life jackets he had at the camp. He said 12. Now, there were 204 learners. We find that the camp was reckless in the extreme in allowing boys to go into a river in those conditions without life jackets. We find the school educators equally negligent in not stopping the exercise because they knew it would end up in the river, because the agenda for the camp said river swim. And they should have stopped this exercise when they saw up on the fields that at the stretcher that the boys were not wearing life jackets. So we find liability in that respect, negligence and extreme recklessness. The issue of whether authorization had been granted for the camp, the procedure is that when schools take learners on camps, whether it's a sports tour or a camp or any activity, they have to apply for permission from the GDE. And the process is set out here. But the fact of the matter is, or the upshot is that they did apply for permission, but it was never granted. The reason why it was never granted was that the application sat on the desks of some junior officials in the district, and it wasn't processed. We find there's culpability in relation to, or negligence, in relation to those certain district officials, and that they should be the subject of disciplinary charges. But at the same time, that does not absolve the school of their responsibility to get permission before you go on these camps. The school said in the explanation, well, look, very often the district doesn't respond to our applications and so on and so on. That may well be the case. But you cannot go on a camp without permission, and you need to get permission. And that permission was not granted. In relation to a camp in another province, it can't just be granted by the district, it's got to be granted at head office. So we find that the SGB is in breach of the obligations because it was signed by the head of the application was signed by the head of the SGB and the school as well. Then that relates to the issue of the authorization of the camp, which has implications for liability and other issues. Then when we interviewed Mr. Knutzer of the camp in the presence of his attorneys from Hertus Peace, we said, have there been any other instances at the camp in which persons have died, learners have died, or youngsters or whoever? He said, yes, there was one in 2008 of a learner who died in the swimming pool. That was not part of an activity. At that point, we hadn't received sufficient information about other learners, and it was brought to our attention, and it was on the front page of the Sunday Times, so we can't claim any great investigative work, that 4 other learners had died at the camp, and we then started to investigate those, and it was found that they had. We then sent a letter to her to Spies, the attorneys for the camp, and we said, have 4 other learners died, or 4 youngsters died at this camp previously in relation to water activities? And they responded by saying, yes, they had, but in relation to unscheduled water activities. In other words, they went on a frolic of their own, like a swim in a pool at night or something like that. We did further investigations. It was quite hard because a lot of the headmasters and mistresses have changed of those schools, so getting that information was not that easy. But we, at least in relation to one case, it was part of a planned activity, and we found that in relation to a particular learner that he died during an exercise where he was swimming across a dam, and he drowned because he couldn't swim. And we find that, sorry, I'm getting to the exact spot. One of the learners was Tuso Moalusi from Melbourne High School. The school confirmed that they had attended a camp there and he had died on a water activity. We interviewed a friend of Mr. Moalusi who said that he was with him in the dam during the course of that water exercise when he drowned. And he gave details of that, all of which are contained in the executive summary. Then there was the death of Tumi Mokamane from Law School Welgedacht. Then there was the death of Portia Sowela. And so Enock Mpianzi was the 5th person to die at Inyati Bush Camp in water, or activities surrounding water. A fact which we find just completely and utterly disgraceful and outrageous. The fact that with those deaths at that camp, learners in this instance from this school, from Parktown Boys, were sent down a river in which there were strong currents in which they could not stand, without life jackets, is beyond comprehension. In relation to issues relating to the school legacy, Harris Newpen Molabatsi had conducted an investigation and delivered a report to the school in 2018 in relation to allegations of sexual abuse and bullying and sexual assault. A lot of it was the subject of a lot of media attention in a subsequent court case. But we also found in that 2018 report that there had been insufficient supervision and presence of educators at the grade 8 camps. And we find that in view of that finding, there should have been a heightened awareness or emphasis on the part of the school in relation to future grade 8 camps. And we don't find that any of that emphasis or heightened awareness was exhibited by the SGB in their capacity as an oversight body or by the school management. It would appear that the preparations, which included all of the safety measures that should have taken place and the rigorous planning that should go into a grade 8 camp, really did not take place at all. And that relates particularly to the presence of learners at the water, of educators at the water exercise when they got down, when the majority of the learners had already gone down and were struggling. The versions of some of the learners, or some of their evidence, is set out in some detail in the executive summary. But, you know, in relation to what we were told by Mr. Knutzer, and when we put to him, and I didn't introduce my team, Tsecho Manana, Mirabril, and Tebogo Ntswane, who are part of the investigation team, should have. When it was put to him whether he had things under control, he said, we had things absolutely under control. We said to him, but you couldn't have had things under control, someone died. He said, we had things under control. When we asked him about the life jackets, he said, we keep life jackets for tubing, not this activity. When we asked him if he knew anything about the children being rescued from the islands, he said, I don't know about islands. The version of the children, because the version of the educators was that when they looked at the children or the youngsters in the water, they thought everything was in control. We asked them if they thought they should have been wearing life jackets. They all said no. I'm not talking about the headmaster now, I'm talking about the 7 educators. They said no, they didn't think they should have been wearing life jackets. We said they looked like they were in distress. They said no, it looked fine. So we don't feel that they exercised a proper judgment. When you speak to the learners, this was a boy who didn't get into the river because he couldn't swim. I walked further and the current got faster, and the boys in my group seemed to be panicking to get back to land. There were 2 facilitators and some boys helping the boys get back to the land. The water was pouring pretty quickly, so it was hard for them to get to the bank. They bailed in the raft, and the facilitators and the boys were holding out bamboo sticks, etc., etc. And so it goes on. One learner says, we passed a motor, and from then on, everybody's raft from each group broke apart. So everyone was everywhere in the water. I asked one of the instructors to help us because boys needed assistance from them. They didn't respond. After the rafts broke, the 2 boys were on top of me trying to save themselves, and I was drowning under the water. When I got up, 2 boys needed help because they didn't know how to swim. I managed to push one out at the checkpoint, but others kept on passing, and the water current was too powerful, and so on and so on. 2 of my friends saved me, and they helped me get me out. And I was trying to save my life. So the version of the learners is a very different version from what you hear from the camp manager and from some of the educators, and there are others. The other thing that I want to address, just very quickly, I'm sorry, but if these facts are complicated, is that there was the issue of a learner who went to the press, I think 702, and on social media as well, who said that he had gone up, or a boy had gone up to a facilitator and or an educator on the Wednesday after the water exercise and said someone was missing. Well, we tried to get hold of that learner. We did speak to the parents of a learner who said their child had spoken to the media. We made numerous requests to them because we were desperate to interview that youngster. We sent a letter, we followed up with various things, correspondence, but that the parents of that boy did not bring him forward, so we were not able to interview him. What is clear from the other learners is that after the exercise, no one came up and said to an educator or a facilitator that a boy was missing or Enock was missing. All of the other boys confirm that. One boy does say that at some point during the roll call, someone got up and spoke to the facilitator and said someone was missing. But when we asked them further, they said they weren't really listening. When we asked them what the response of the educator was, he said, I was talking to my friends at the time and I didn't notice. That same boy was asked on the Thursday, when they pulled the whole of a particular group that Enock was in, who was swimming in the swimming pool on Thursday morning, and they were pulled out of the, asked to step out of the pool, and they were gathered in a group by an educator, and the educator said, did you at any stage...
2 jackpots? Here are the lotto numbers.
And said that they think that a boy is missing and his name is Enock, because the boy who told the headmaster had sat with them on the bus and with them at lunch before. So that took place on the Thursday, so we don't know if there's confusion between the two, but the version of the other learners is that nothing was conveyed to any educator or facilitator on the Wednesday after the water exercise that someone was missing. That it was also mentioned that one boy who spoke to the media said that they had chicken feet for dinner. In fact, what happened, and all the learners confirmed this, as do the educators, is that they did have chicken feet which they had to cook on a fire, and was part of an exercise, and that after the chicken feet, the main meal was delivered by the camp, and the boys ate that main meal. So that also appears not to be entirely correct. The findings and recommendations, we find that the principal, Mr. Williams, should be the subject of disciplinary action as the CEO or headmaster of the school in relation to the issue of roll calls, the accuracy of the roll call list, the issue of safety and care of learners, life jackets, the issue of authorization, and so on. And largely the same with the educators, although their disciplinary charges, which we recommend, relate to the issue of safety and care of learners during the water exercise, the issue of life jackets for grade 8 learners, and lack of control of the learners. The school we found to have been negligent, if not reckless, in allowing the water exercise to go ahead when the educators knew from the agenda that the activity would end with a river swim. It relates to the issue of life jackets. It relates to the control and the duty of care of the educators. And we find similarly the SGB in relation to allowing the camp to take place without authorization was behaved improperly, and they should have also ensured that there were the proper safety measures for the camp. The liability of the GDE is ultimately liable in terms of criminal action for these types of things in terms of Section 60 of SASA. And also we've recommended disciplinary action in relation to those district officials who did not do their jobs in processing the application of the school. We make general recommendations about the fact that the GDE should regulate the types of camps to which public schools go in terms of their level of safety, supervision, facilities, care and well-being, and that it should not be something that's just left to the school, because as things stand now, the schools choose the camps. And that was an issue that was raised by one of the parents. We make recommendations into relation to the safety regulations in terms of the South African Schools Act. In relation to Inyati, we find them to be reckless and negligent in respect of the issue of safety and care of learners during the water exercise, the route followed by the learners during the water exercises, the issue of life jackets, and we recommend that they should be held responsible and liable for its negligent and reckless actions that contribute to the circumstances that led to the death of Enock Mpianzi. That's a summary.
It's quite a painful process, but we just have to soldier on. After reading such a report, it becomes difficult to be normal again. That's the report, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to explain process from the side of the department. We've met with the SGB, as we've indicated, and we've presented this report, and we've pointed the seriousness of this report, and we're meeting with them urgently so that we can facilitate the disciplinary hearings that have been identified. Myself, in my capacity as the MEC as well as the HOD, there are directives from the report that compels us to act against the principal, but also compels us to act against the district officials, and we have already resumed with that task, and all the relevant documentation have been dispatched to those affected parties. There is another element of the Nyati Bush. We have issued a communique to our schools to suspend the use of that facility Now that the report is out, we'll issue a communique to all our schools to never attend or utilize that facility. But most importantly, we are weighing all our legal options on the current and previous cases. But we also feel that there are other state institutions that must come on board and assist us to enforce this matter. We will, in the next 2 weeks, conclude all administrative responsibilities that have been assigned to us by this report, and will ensure that the recommendations are adhered to so that we don't have the challenges that we have. We've already introduced, and I was saying to the team, it's very difficult. I'm releasing this report at the school. Today, I received a request from this school to authorize a trip to go to Czechoslovakia from this good team. So I just set aside that report. I said, maybe let me go through this pain first. I'll come back and determine whether we need to authorize. But we have issued a communique to all our schools to ensure that any water activity related matters, it must meet 7 certain criteria. Amongst the 7 is to ensure that there is life jackets, and that there must be a certificate to indicate that the boats that are going to be utilized are safe. And thirdly, that there must be people that are experts, that is lifesavers on site. And also that we have given guidelines that one boat of a certain size must fit how many learners, and a boat of a certain size must carry how many learners. So we are grateful to the institutions and NGOs that are working in this sector, because they're assisting us to finalize this particular manual. Upon conclusion, then our schools will be in a position to follow this manual. We are also amending the consent forms that parents fill. These consent forms, we are bringing an element that in the form, the school must confirm that they visited the place where they want children to go, unless that place is outside the country, and that there is a declaration that the place is safe. Because on the basis of Nyati Lodge, just a desktop check would have indicated that there were previous deaths in that camp, and the school would have not gone there. So we'll also finalize that aspect and conclude it. That's how we intend to handle this report. But you can see the report is damning. There are serious findings. And as soon as we meet, because we received this report today, share it with the SGB. As soon as we meet with the SGB again later this week, we'll then ensure that the recommendations are adhered to. So I want to leave it here, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a long, 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 tiring and emotionally draining day. So I'll plead with you that I'll ask Steve just to take one round. And if needs be, I'll politely request you to go through the report. I think all the answers are there, but there might be areas that you want us to clarify, we'll clarify. It's not because we don't respect you, good people. It's just, we must give you quality response. We must not just give you response for dismissing you because we're exhausted, but we chose to work for the nation, so we'll work. Let's take those questions.
In that order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think we'll close it there. Yeah. Okay.
In other words, I felt you used us as spoken on that. I'll move on to the report. MEC, yes, you heard them. The report says negligence, dangerous, false information, no life jackets, history of the school, no roll call list, no permission. It reads like people who are used to flouting the rules and getting away with it. And this time a child died. And the SGB still has the goal to say to you, can the reputation of the school be protected? What reputation? At this time, does it not feel like the department has to step in? I don't know what measures need to be taken, but I think that the headmaster and some educators will not stop the behavior of the culture at the schoolhouse, because also Mr. Harris mentioned the sexual abuse stories that had happened. We still have to deal with Parktown Boys High and these atrocities that happen to children. So I just think the department has to do more than just discipline a few people. Thank you.
Okay.
Echoing my colleague's sentiments about our treatment, and my first question was covered by Gohan, what will be done? But are the teachers still working here? Is the principal still here? And don't you think that considering, like Mohammed just said, considering what has happened, what more can be done except for maybe, the invite? So are they still working here? And are there grounds for the families to charge criminal offences to either the school, the principal, the camp? Aside from your civil one, can they come up with criminal charges for this?
Okay, is number 4. Yeah.
I also echo the sentiments. What happened here today should not have happened. It's the second time. But I think my question, let me just get to my question. It's also on the issue of what I said about reputation. There seems to be a culture. We've all agreed, and I think it was the very same law firm that noted that there were certain cultures in the school that were unacceptable, and you also echoed that, MEC, numerous occasions. Now my question then comes to issues like today. It seems that the department is also an enabler of the issue of silence and things being done a certain way at this particular school. We'll speak about Parktown because it's here that we keep coming. Are you not concerned about this, MEC, that it may seem like you enable these parents? For example, we all know this is a public issue. There was nothing sensitive. There were no children here. And I think we as the South African media, are rather responsible in our treatment of children. Are we not concerned about that we will also find ourselves here? The fact that an SGB can make a plea to you to say they're concerned about reputation is very, very concerning, MEC, and I want to know how are you going to tackle that, because there is no school that has the right to speak about reputation when parents are in mourning. And we all have children that must go to camp and then matter of reputation. It cannot be. Thank you.
Chanel from the Daily Maverick. I just want to understand, is there going to be charges of culpable homicide? So I just want a direct answer in terms of the charges and who the charges are going to be against, like specifically. Then in terms of the SGB as well, because it seems like the SGB also can be, the guts that they have to ask that question, it seems a little bit like, how do you genuinely feel about that question? And then I also share the same sentiments with my colleague as well. The treatment today was disgusting.
I do share my colleague's sentiments about the treatment today, and I also didn't appreciate the fact that we were told that we're dramatic, vocalizing how we felt about the treatment today. So I think we should address that. My two questions are, prior to this report being released, you use very strong terms on how action is going to be taken against those responsible. Heads will roll, people will have to go. Given that now that the findings have recommended that action be taken against the whistleblower that is suspended, what are you going to do in that regard? You mentioned that a lot of teachers are implicated in the report. What action is going to be taken against them? When we were at the meeting, the last one we were kicked out of, you mentioned that there would be criminal charges made against anyone responsible who would want them. Given that there is an as last year, is the department going to be being charged against them?
Hi,
Okay, you're the last one.
Linda Mnisa from Newsroom Africa. MEC, currently the family is conducting their own investigation into the matter. You would have to then be the defendant in this case. Are you planning to defend the department in this case?
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much for your understanding. I truly appreciate that. Colleagues, I'm not going to justify the wrongness of parents saying you must leave the meeting. I'm not going to justify that. And if I have to respond to the accusation by Kauchel, I will sound that I'm justifying. So I want to leave it. But honestly, to be accused that I'm using you as a token, I take that seriously. Maybe Kauchel has an angle that he wants to bring to my attention. I will. The media team will tell you, in each and every grouping that we're meeting this morning, we indicated that we have made an invite to the meeting. Even the SGB, we indicated that we've made an invite. I got a letter, and I want Steve to share that letter. My office will share that letter. I got a letter that I was insulted by some of these parents, that I want a senior position in the ANC, and I'm allowing the media to cover this thing so that I can be elected in the next conference of the ANC. By the parents here. So the team only alerted me when we entered in this room, Steve, that there are parents that have raised objection. I met with them, tried to persuade them otherwise. And they said I must put it in a vote. And that's what I've done. But as I said, the more I explain, it will be as if I'm justifying. And for that, I want to apologize. I've apologized. I emphasized to the parents when you are not here that you are a fourth estate and you've got a constitutional obligation to report on some of these events and activities. On how we arrive at the scene, leave you there or not come there, Steve will do that. I always arrive on time. You have to deal with that. I sometimes leave him behind, he knows. I sometimes leave him behind because I take this kind of things. To me, they are not a TV show. I'm going to give comfort to a family. And that's what I've done. I've gone to 27 families since the 15th of January. Personally. I've not sent an HOD. I've not sent a representative. I've gone there personally. And that's what I've raised with these families, especially on the issue of the image of the school. That maybe I'm overreacting when I reprimanded them to withdraw that statement, that the reputation of the school must supersede a life of a learner that died at the school. Actually, in one meeting, one parent had the guard to tell me, one member of the SGB, that Enoch has been in this school for 2 days. Why compare 2 days to 930 students that are here? So these are the kinds of comments that are directed at us. And then we are insulted that we are using you as tokens and other things. So I don't want to go there. I will defend your right to exist. I will defend your right to report. I'll be with you when you need a report. In all meetings that I deal with issues, I even invite you to be part of those meetings. And I've taken a flag because of the posture that I've taken. Those that don't know that I was once a Steve in my life as well. I was once a Steve in my life, and I've been a media practitioner for 19 years. So I can't change overnight. But your concern is registered. I'm going to, when I meet with the SGB, I'm going to register it again, and I'll persuade them to apologize to you as well, so that the apology must not come from me only, that it will come from them as well. So I want to leave it there to deal with these things. On the issue of flouting of rules and the flouting of everything, the way the report captured. That's the reason why we have to act. That's the reason why we want to act. To say we have not acted on a previous report is false. The previous report said we must change the leadership of the hostel. We have changed that leadership. Actually, we went beyond the call because normally the head of the hostel is a man. We even appointed a woman. The report said that we must charge the educators that were involved. We have charged those educators. All those educators are no longer at this school. That were part of that 2018 report. The report said that should lay a criminal charge and people must go to court. There is a court hearing of Mr. Rex, no? Yes. So anyone, and the SGB tried also to raise this matter, to say we didn't give them a report. So they didn't know that there is restrictions in terms of grade 8 camps because they didn't get the report. And we pointed to them that they got the report. Because every time we release a report, we take the SGB through, purely because we know they must implement the recommendations of that report. So we'll indeed take action. Jacaranda, the issue that the principal is not here. The principal is on suspension. His suspension expires in April. So our intention is that on the basis of the recommendations, that we should resolve this matter before the end of that suspension. The teachers could not be suspended because in the preliminary report, the teachers were not implicated. Now that we've received this report, we'll then start that process. Remember, of the 5 teachers that are implicated, all of them are employed by the SGB except the principal. So that's the reason why we must meet with the SGB so that the SGB must fast-track this element and attend to it. I think, Matloko, I responded to the issue of the reputation. I've raised my consent, I flagged my consent, I reprimanded them, I indicated my dissatisfaction, I emphasized that the life of a child comes first more than any other thing. But I take note of their concerns. And I think that particular aspect will be in a position to interact with the relevant people when we meet with them. Daily Maverick, the issue of charges, there is a case already. And we felt that we can't, until that case is finalized by the police and is presented to us, we can't preempt whether the police will charge people with culpable homicide or what. Because we are interested in that report. Because why we are interested is that all the other 4 deaths that occurred there, they were reported with the police and there was nothing that happened. So Enock can't be another statistic in this matter. So we'll follow it, we'll monitor it, and we'll raise it with the relevant law enforcement agencies to ensure that it does not go the same route of the other 4 children that have died at that center. So we will follow it up and we'll deal with it. Well, how do the SGB feel? I must be honest, we still need a session with the SGB just for them to understand some of the findings. We just presented it today. Maybe they need to go through the report to understand some of these findings, because some of these findings, not even some, all these findings are damning. And we can't just treat them casually and say, this is a report. And we'll take it that way. Ian say, the criminal charges have been laid already. We want to monitor that. Indeed, we want to take, maybe let me put it this way. When we presented the report to the family and the legal firm of the family, and when they indicated that they're going to have their own investigation, it's quite clear that it's just to strengthen the case to sue the department. or sue the school or sue the camp place. And our attitude is very simple. There is a loss of life. Wherever there's loss of life, I always advise our legal team that we are not going to go on a defensive mode. Our approach is persuade each other, agree at the settlement, and leave it out. Because you can't have a prolonged process. But if people are unreasonable with us, unfortunately, we have to defend matters at the relevant courts. But where we are, our approach is to ensure that there is a reasonable settlement on this particular matter. Actually, the Gauteng provincial government, with the experience of the Department of Health, has established a team of lawyers and people that negotiate the settlement on behalf of government. So we will activate that aspect if there is a need for us to do so. But I still emphasize, heads will roll, they have to. Already at the district level, we have served people with documents. The educators that are implicated here, they've been served. We've given the SGB the relevant documents, and the principal, we've provided the relevant information that you need to answer. So we are still firm on that aspect, because we can't just leave things the way they are. News 24, how many educators are implicated is 5. The part that the school management objected to, they didn't necessarily object. I think the people that raised some objections were the SGB. The school management needed clarity of the educators that were at camp, and whether when we take action, the school is going to be supported. You know, 5 educators is quite a lot, so they might need replacement. And we said the school is not going to be worse off. We'll find a way of working with the SGB to deal with this matter. Newsroom, I think I've responded to you that it's not defending the case at all cost. To us, the views of the parents and the views of the department should find expression, and we should reach a resolution that will not allow this process to be prolonged. It's quite clear in the findings who's responsible for what has happened. The school was not sanctioned, so the department didn't sanction the trip. And you are quite aware that even the venue where this incident happened didn't meet the necessary basic standards. So all of us, we just have to find a way of dealing with this matter. But you'll see in the report, they also cover the issue of liability, and also covers what the school insurance can cover and what the school insurance can't cover. So that aspect is in the report. So on the basis of that, we'll be in a position to then meet with the legal representative of Enock's family and then deal with that aspect in that fashion. If you don't mind, can I leave it here? I hope you understand why we feel the other way around. We have raised the issue of security as well for yourself. So I wish you well, and Steve will deal with other aspects if you want other things. But thank you so much for your time. Let me thank Peter and the team for the diligent work, the patience that they've exercised. I suspect your voice is going through difficulties, Peter. You have been just going through this report since early this morning. But for that, we appreciate. I wish you well. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. See you on Saturday. Can we do